The New York Giants offense aspires to be a well-rounded group in 2025, and they can be if their offensive line steps up and overcomes the challenges that we'll discuss next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, welcome on into our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, Giant fans, on today's program, we're going to take a look at the New York Giants offensive line. We're continuing our preview of the Giants' various position groups. So offensive line is last up in our look at the offensive side of the ball. Our next shows, we'll take a look at the defensive side of the ball. But for the offensive line, we're going to look at the entire unit. I didn't break it down to tackles and interior. I just did the entire unit. So we'll start off by looking at the performance metrics from last year. Then we'll go into a look at some of the individual performances and where guys kind of fell short versus where they did well. And then, of course, we will wrap things up with some questions and what to watch when we get to training camp, which will be here before you know it. We're already into July, and the countdown's on. We're just literally like days away from the start of training camp. So it'll be here, and we're here to cover it all. So anyhow, we'll get you ready. Let's get into it. All right, the New York Giants offensive line. Now, in the past, we always would do our previews, and we would say, okay, the big question regarding the New York Giants offensive line is the unit better or different? Now, this year, the question is not so much different because it looks like the same 5 starters from last year are projected to return this year. So the question now becomes, are they going to be better than what they were? Now, there's an asterisk there because the unit last year, they only had 6 games together before injuries started wrecking them and tearing things apart. And then suddenly, they went on this odyssey of 10 different combinations, might have been even more. I think I'm just counting like the starting combinations, but there were 10 different combinations. And just really by the end of the season, the Giants offensive line collectively not very good. So I have some stats that I'm going to read off for you. We'll take a look first at the win rates. So the pass block win rate, according to ESPN stats, the Giants ranked 26. Right? They had a 56% pass block win rate. Run block, they ranked 27 with a 69% win rate. Now, again, this is all the combinations together. This isn't the starting 5 that began the first 6 weeks of the season and actually looked pretty good. So kind of, the underlying problem, the big takeaway, if you will, with the Giants offensive line, not so much the starters last year, but the lack of depth that stepped in to fill in when guys got hurt. That was a huge problem. That has been a big problem for the Giants for I don't know how long now. Basically, they just, for whatever reason, have not been able to develop younger talent on the roster to have them ready to step in if there is an injury. And that has hurt the Giants offensive line year after year after year. All right, now let's take a look at the rushing yardage and the rushing direction. The Giants in weeks 1 through 6, when they had the starting 5 of Andrew Thomas, John Renan Jr., John Michael Schmidz, Greg Van Roten, and Jermaine Illuminor, the Giants averaged 103.2 rushing yards over the course of those first 6 games. For the last from week 7 through 17, the Giants averaged 104.4 rushing yards per game, but the last 4 games of the season, they didn't go over 100 yards. I think week 18, they hit 100 right on the button, but that was against the Eagles backups. So, you're not talking a huge difference here, but still, it just, the run blocking wasn't as sharp as it could have been. And again, that was because of the injuries, I think, that were factoring into the different lineups and the cohesiveness and whatnot. Now, breaking down the rushing direction and how the Giants did this, according to the NFL's official stats that we in the media get. Left end, the Giants ranked 32nd. Left tackle, they were ranked 11th. Left guard, 5th. Up the middle, 20th. Right guard, 32nd. Right tackle, 21st. And right end, 5th. So the thing to remember, though, about these rankings here is it wasn't all specific. Like, for example, up the middle, with the Giants ranked 20th, sometimes you had guys, pull, you had double blocks and stuff like that. So this is just a general idea of how the Giants did in terms of the direction, the rushing direction, where they ended up ranking. So, the best run blocker for the Giants, hands down, was Evan Neal, believe it or not. Evan Neal, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in the next segment, but Evan Neal was a people mover when it came to run blocking, which is why the Giants have not given up on him, despite what I think some people want to see happen. So Evan Neal, according to Pro Football Focus, ranked with an 80.8 score as a run blocker, the best on the team, better than Andrew Thomas, who was the second best run blocker amongst the offensive linemen. He had a 73.8 grade. All others, 67 or less. So the run blocking kind of needs to pick up a little bit, but it's worth noting that the way that offensive line last year, the starting offensive line, was constructed, most of the guys on that line were better pass protectors than run blockers, because the idea was for the Giants to open up the passing game and become a little bit more of a deep downfield type of passing offense, which, as we know, didn't quite work out. So, speaking of passing, let's take a look real quick at what the Giants did. Now, their top pass protectors, according to Pro Football Focus, Andrew Thomas with a 71.8 grade, Jermaine Oluminor, 71.0. The interior linemen, none of them graded out at more than 64.9. So the interior linemen, I broke down the quarterback pressures, and out of the 32 sacks that Pro Football Focus had the Giants giving up last year, 13 came from the interior. The interior linemen, again, that would be the left guard, right guard, and center, they gave up 92 quarterback pressures. So that was not good either. Now, I've been talking about pressures and all that stuff, but it's worth noting here that the quarterbacks were also kind of responsible for their own pressures. Not all of them, but some of them. So what do I mean by that? Well, if a quarterback held the ball too long, well, sure, he was going to get pressured, because the offensive linemen can really only be expected to hold their blocks for so long. So I broke that down for you. According to Pro Football Focus, last year, Drew Lock was responsible for 8.5% of the pressures he endured. Tommy DeVito, 10.5%. Tim Boyle, 15.4%. Daniel Jones, 17.2%. So yes, the quarterbacks had some of the, had a hand, if you will, in some of the pressures they endured. Now, why is there reason to believe that the Giants pass pro might be a little bit better, in addition to the fact that it looks like they might have the same starting 5 guys in there? Well, very simply, Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston don't hang on to the ball. They get rid of the ball quickly. And if you have a quarterback that can drop back, make a quick read, and get the ball out of his hand, chances are your offensive linemen aren't going to be taxed too heavily. They're going to be able to hold their block, and you're going to see a much cleaner game, a much cleaner pocket, just a much cleaner everything in terms of the passing game. So that is the hope with the Giants this year, that the fact that they got 2 quarterbacks in there who can get rid of the ball quickly, and you can even throw Jackson Dart in there, who has been known to get rid of the ball quickly. The hope is that the sacks, the quarterback pressures, all that will drop a little bit, and the Giants will be able to operate a little bit more smoothly as a passing offense. Now, a couple more things I want to talk about real quick before we go into the individuals with the Giants offensive line. A big problem for this unit has been the lack of development of the youth behind the starters. All right. So you look at Evan Neal, who has struggled to develop. John Michael Schmidz is still not probably where you'd like him to be after 2 years in the league. Jake Kubas is coming on. He was pretty good last year, but still has work to do. Joshua Zudu just hasn't quite developed the consistency. And we don't know how Marcus Bowe is going to develop. I mean, there's hope for him, but we have to see how he develops. So really, one of the big problems for the Giants offensive line is that they don't really have guys in the cupboard so that when injuries happen, they can plug somebody in there and not have to worry about that big of a drop off in the production. So health is also a factor for the Giants offensive line. Now, last year, and I found this according to Nat Schatz, who did an article on man games lost. The Giants were the 13th most injured offense in man games lost, right? They averaged 28.8 man games lost on offense. That was a little bit better than 2023, but still, that was a lot of injuries. So if you break down the number of games that the starting offensive linemen miss, Andrew Thomas missed 11, John Renan Jr. missed 4, John Michael Schmidz missed 2, Greg Van Roten did not miss any. He was the Iron Man of the group. Jermaine Illuminor missed 2. So that's 19 man game losses and 10 different offensive line combinations that ensued. So that's something that ideally you want to clean up. And again, if you have guys developed and ready to go, ready to step in, maybe you can kind of get by if you have an injury or two, except if it's to Andrew Thomas, who, clearly is head and shoulders above everybody else on that offensive line. But anyway, all right, coming up next, we're going to break down each of the key starters and key reserves. So that's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if their first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We are talking New York Giants offensive line as we continue our look at the New York Giants position groups, kind of getting you ready for training camp, which will be here on the 23rd. It's going to go fast. It always does. So for the rest of this week here on the Locked On Giants podcast, I'll have one more show for you. I'll have that for you tomorrow. We'll look at one of the defensive positions. And then I'm going to take a little time off with the 4th of July holiday coming up. So we'll only do 3 shows this week. And then next week I'll continue back, or I'll pick up where I left off with continuing to preview the Giants position groups, as well as some other stuff that I have coming up. And as guys and gals come back from vacation over at the NFL Network, hopefully I can grab one of those folks to come on the show a little later on, leading up into camp, to talk about the state of the Giants. So that's all what's coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you will stay with me when we have shows out. All right, let's get into the offensive line individuals. All right, now I'm just going to go through the main guys right now, the guys we know about and the key reserves. So we will kick things off with the best of the bunch, which is Andrew Thomas, left tackle. Really, Andrew Thomas, what can you say about his game? The guy is just good at pass pro. He's good at run blocking, just good at so many things, except for one. He can't seem to stay healthy, right? He has played in 16 games over the last 2 seasons. He's had foot and ankle issues that don't seem to go away. I don't know necessarily if that's going to eventually catch up with him in terms of being able to anchor or push off or anything like that. But I'm not going to lie, folks, I am a little bit concerned about the recurring issues because really, Andrew Thomas, you can go back to his rookie season when he had an ankle issue. And then at one point, he had ankle surgery. And then the hamstring issue happened a couple years ago, and then last year it was the Liz Frank injury. So you just kind of hope that Andrew Thomas can kick these injuries, and get rid of them so that he could stay on the field because there really is a huge difference when Andrew Thomas is not on the field. All right, Jon Runyan Jr. Now, when the Giants signed Jon Runyan Jr. a couple of off seasons ago, the word on him was he was a real good pass protector and a decent run blocker, but pass pro was really his strength. And I think you can honestly say that proved to be the case last year with the Giants. All right. Jon Runyan Jr., his footwork and his flexibility lacked a little bit in the run blocking game, wasn't able to generate a whole lot of movement, on some of his solo blocks. But pass pro, he was really good. All right. He did a good job mirroring his man. He did a good job with his hand placement. Jon Runyan Jr. was signed for pass pro because, again, the Giants last year, they aspired to open up the passing game, become more of a deep passing offense, which, as we know by now, they just weren't able to accomplish because of the quarterback situation. But this year, the hope is that they'll be able to do that. But run blocking is certainly going to be important. And Jon Runyan Jr., he's adequate at that role. So I really don't think there's any need to sit there and say, okay, his job is in jeopardy. But there's going to be competition along the interior offensive line, especially at guard, and especially if Evan Neal, who we'll talk about in just a moment, steps up and shows that he can really, be a good run blocker as he has shown flashes of in the past. All right, John Michael Schmidz at center. Schmidz is kind of interesting in that he hasn't been horrible. But for a second-round draft pick and a guy who was touted as one of the best centers in his draft class, I don't think he has quite lived up to that billing. All right. You watch John Michael Schmitz's game, and he lacks physicality and nimbleness. And that's a really, really tough combination for an interior offensive lineman to overcome. John Michael Schmidz, trouble sliding on pass pro. His footwork was just, not consistent, below average, if you will. And there were times when he was just having trouble staying on his feet, which is another thing you don't want to see from your interior lineman. So John Michael Schmidz also, one other point I'll make real quick about him. When he did get to the second level, you want to see guys hit defenders. You don't want to see them just seal them off. And John Michael Schmidz did a little bit more sealing than hitting, which got the job done. But, you want to hit a guy, you want to knock him off his feet and get him out of the way. You don't want to give him a chance to bounce off of you and chase down the ball carrier. So John Michael Schmidz, he's progressing, but not as quickly, I think, as a lot of people thought he might. Now, he's also had the shoulder issue. He had it in his rookie season. He missed part of training camp last year. I think he missed several weeks with the shoulder issue. He came back. He was fine for the regular season, but you wonder if something's going on there because, look, the whole thing with John Michael Schmidz is he needs to get stronger. Now, I don't know, maybe he was able to do that this past offseason. Obviously, in the springtime, we didn't get to see the guys with the pads on, so there was no contact. You couldn't really tell that. But that's something you want to be looking for in John Michael Schmitz's game this year. Has he become more physical? And is he stronger now to where he can just, instead of being ragdoll, maybe ragdoll some of the defenders he's going to go up against? All right. Greg Van Roten, he was, to use Greg Van Roten, Johnny on the spot. All right. He came in late last year after the offseason was over, came in, I think, the second week of training camp. Versatile, could play either guard spot, moved into the center spot when needed. Doesn't have ideal mobility, but you know what? He got the job done. So I personally didn't have many problems with Van Roten's game. I find it interesting that a lot of people think that he's not a slam dunk to return. But again, there's going to be competition. Competition never hurt anybody. I think the Giants ideally would like to maybe see if Evan Neal can take one of those guard spots, whether it be left guard, where he worked a lot during the spring, and then maybe that moves John Runyon Jr. over to right guard and makes Van Roten the backup at both guard spots and center. Maybe that's the plan the Giants want, but again, we'll have to see how that all plays out during the summer. Jermaine Illuminor, good in pass pro. I think Jermaine Illuminor's pass pro was very underrated on the offensive line. Quick setup, good balance in retreat. He was rarely beaten off the snap to the inside. He was also rarely beaten with power. You look at his film, most of the quarterback pressures that he gave up came to the outside. So Jermaine Illuminor, and you throw in the position flexibility where he moved over to left tackle and he was able to calm down that mess that was going on last year. Jermaine Illuminor has been well worth the money spent on him, I think. All right. We'll talk real quick about Evan Neal. I mentioned before, Evan Neal as a run blocker, beautiful sight to see. I mean, he's a big man. He has natural power and a feel for run blocking. I mean, when he gets on you as a run blocker and pushes you out of the way, he is a people mover. All right. So there's a lot to like about Evan Neal as a run blocker. Pass pro is going to be the question mark for him. Now, it's interesting because he didn't really have the feet to mirror guys and stay with guys on an island when he played a tackle. Is he going to be able to adjust and handle that moved inside when he's in a phone booth? All right. Remember, he's going up against more athletic defensive linemen than, maybe used to be the case back in the day. So that's going to be a key thing for Evan Neal. And then another key thing for Evan Neal to keep an eye on is going to be his pad level. He is a tall man, and pad level tends to rise on those big guys. And we kind of saw it during the spring when we were watching the offensive line drills. What they do is they had like a low canopy, which the idea is to run through the canopy with your pad level low. And if you rise, you're going to hit the top of that canopy. And if you're doing that, it means your pad level is rising. And, that's just something they have to keep an eye on with Evan Neal. So that's a drill certainly I'll be keeping an eye on when they get to training camp to see if he can keep his pad level low. Because if a guy gets underneath him, then, it's all done. So, all right. Now, I didn't go into Jay Kubas, who, played well. We'll see where he factors in. Marcus Bowe, I know a lot of people are probably curious about, but we need to see him with the pads on. So I just wanted to touch upon those main five guys because those are the guys that we're going to be really keeping an eye on, really looking at, is Evan Neal going to fit in there some way, somehow? It's not going to be a tackle, and we'll talk about that a little bit more just coming up, but Evan Neal could be the key here for the offensive line. He is expected to challenge, but how far along is he? Is he going to be ready to do? Can he handle it? These are all questions that we will hopefully have answered once we get to training camp. All right, speaking of questions, coming up next, I'm going to go through some of the questions I have about the Giants offensive line group as configured, so don't go anywhere. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are taking a look at the New York Giants offensive line, doing a little preview here, as we have been doing on the show of late, looking at each Giants position unit group. And now we're going to take a look at some questions about the offensive line, stuff that maybe we don't yet know the answers to, but hopefully we will have answers to by the time summer training camp is over. First question, obviously, do they have enough quality depth? Depth was a problem last year. We saw it. When guys started to get injured, with few exceptions, the Giants struggled to plug holes. Now, this year, Joe Shane, the general manager, went out and he added experienced tackles, including guys that have played left tackle. Unlike in years past when Andrew Thomas has gone down and the Giants have brought in right tackles and asked them to play on the left side, which, as I am told, is not necessarily an easy thing. So the left tackle depth includes James Hudson III, Stone Forsythe, and yes, even Joshua Azudu will compete to hold down that position. Now, what's interesting is I think last year Hudson played a lot more on the right side than he did on the left side, but he does have more experience on the left side. So I would think going into the summer, Hudson is probably the favorite, if you will, to be the immediate backup to Andrew Thomas. But of course, that's why you go in and you compete because maybe, who knows, maybe Stone Forsythe steps up, maybe Azudu steps up, maybe Marcus Bowe will step up. And speaking of Marcus Bowe, question that I have about him is, can he truly be David Deal 2.0? And what I mean by that is David Deal could play anywhere on the offensive line except for center. And he played very well, regardless of where you put him. Marcus Bowe, he has that background where he has played multiple positions. Can he be that guy to where you plug him in at guard, you don't have to worry about him? Or if you plug him in at tackle, you don't have to worry about him. So that's a question that he's going to need to show in the preseason games and of course, throughout summer. John Michael Schmidz, again, I talked about it earlier. John Michael Schmidz needs to take that next step. He's been okay, but the Giants need a little bit more than just okay from him. And, it boils down to, can he stay healthy and has he added to his strength? That has been, I think, the biggest issue with John Michael Schmitz's game is that the strength just hasn't been what you would like to see from your starting center. So has he added to that? And we'll find that out, obviously, once the pads go on and the hitting is allowed. And then interior offensive linemen, how is that going to shake out? Now, again, we talked about the possibility that the Giants will go into the season with the same starting 5 guys that they had last year, a group that didn't do that badly. All right. But is there going to be a place for Evan Neal? There could be. Is Evan Neal going to be, the left guard? I think that is where they want him to go. But he's also been working at right guard on occasion. But here's the biggest question. Do you really want to upset the apple cart? If that unit did so well the first 6 weeks of the season, and the numbers indicate that they did, the film indicates that they did, do you really want to upset that apple cart? We talk about offensive line, we talk about continuity and how important that is for the same 5 guys to continue working together. So if you're the coaching staff, you're going to need probably to be blown away by, say, Evan Neal or Jay Kubas or whoever you want to put, whoever, insert whatever name you want, to say, okay, you know what? We liked last year's group, but we got to make a change because these other guys are kind of forcing our hand at that. So that's, to me, the biggest question is, will they be able to keep the same 5 guys and build on what they started last year? Now, the other side of the coin, if you want to make this argument, is that they only played together for 6 games last year. And it was the first 6 games. So it's kind of like starting all over again. They haven't really played together much in the springtime. But again, with the spring, there's no hitting, there's no contact. So maybe it's not as big of a deal. But I, for one, am curious to see how that all plays out. Because will the Giants roll with the same 5 guys? Will they mix it up? Will there be any challenges from the guys underneath them to push these guys, the starters, particularly on the interior, to the bench, to where we have a new combination come week 1? So that being said, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Now, for your next listen, please consider checking out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, Your hosts, Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll start looking at the New York Giants defensive side of the ball. So hope you will tune in. Until then, thank you so much for spending part of your day with me, and I will see you tomorrow.